Hello. Welcome to Storytime with Moog. I am Moog, and today we are reading Grimm's Fairy Tales. But first, reading updates. I'm currently reading Black Leopard, Red Wolf by Marlon James. I've talked about it enough, so I'm not going to talk about it too much. But it is I would classify it as a literary book, a literary novel. It has a lot of mythologies and lore and um, what am I trying to say? Myths that are not familiar to me. They're like African, and I just don't know who these gods are or don't know who these entities are, which I might get a better appreciation if I did. But the overall frame of the story is there is this group of people who are out searching for a boy who has been stolen. And then everything else is just like extra fun side stories. Well, fun. They're not fun. Nothing about this book is particularly fun. But it's just like extra context and extra like depth and layers that they're adding to the story. It is a series. I don't know if I'm gonna continue on. It's not like a fun, good time reading this. And again, I think if I had taken or have this in conjunction with a class that focuses on um the other like context in this story, I think I would have a better appreciation for it than I do. But that being said, it is well written. It is very dense, but it is well written and nice. Excuse me, and good. I am also still reading the first compendium of Invincible. I am now just reading like a couple episodes a day instead of sitting down for like a couple hours at a time to read it, and I'm finding that to be much more enjoyable. So that's just going to be something that I have in the background as I continue it. I'm reading Robin Hobb, of course, forever reading Robin Hobb, and I'm also reading The Haunting of Velkwood. I'm probably getting that wrong, but it is a ghost story and I'm enjoying it so far. I'm not super far into it, but we are following this person who I forgot her name, but we're following this person who is one of three survivors of this block, this city, or this like neighborhood block that had been obliterated. And now that block is haunted, and a lot of people are unable to even get into the block because the like atmosphere just won't allow them to. So that's cool. The part that I just got to, she goes in there for a study. It's her first time going back to the neighborhood. She goes in there and they give her a clock or like a little timer, and she's only supposed to be there for an hour. And she goes in and she like is seeing the ghosts of her neighbors past, and she walks out after the hour, and the person that she went in, like the researcher that like set everything up, is no longer waiting for her, so she's a little pissed, and she like tracks him down and is like, dude, what's your deal? Why weren't you waiting for me? You said you would be here when I got out. I was only in there in an hour, like you said. She was in there for 3 months. For 3 months. Ooh, ooh, ooh. So it's exciting. It's a good time so far. We'll see. There's of course things that our narrator is withholding even from us, so I'm excited to see like how that is going to play out. And there was only one neighbor in like one ghost neighbor that directly spoke to her. Like everybody else was just saying like vague things if they were saying anything at all, but this one neighbor looked her in the eyes and spoke to her, and it's like, ooh, ooh, and there's something about her that our narrator knows that we don't. So exciting, interesting things. I'm enjoying it. I'm not reading it as it being scary, but I can see how it would be scary. But it's a romp for me so far. It is a romp. But I think that's all I'm reading right now. I think that's it. Today we are going to be continuing on with Grimm's fairy tales. There are like hundreds. I think I read 400 that there are 400 fairy tales, but I'm not really sure. The one that we're reading from is the first collected volume, so there's 86 in here. I don't know how many we've read. I'm not going to count it out, but we're about ish a third of the way through. And I'm enjoying it so far. They're mostly pretty short. I think our longest one took about like 20 minutes to read. And so, a lot more are familiar than I thought that they would be. Whether it's like an inkling or it's like, oh, this was a movie or whatever the case is. I think that's really fun. The writing style I'm super enjoying. The Brothers Grimm are just, and not that the writing is just like magnificent and wonderful and over the top, but the way that things are, like the violence is just so like brutal, but just very matter of fact and not like overindulging, which is really nice. Um, because you can have that and like your mind is just like, oh, okay. Instead of like you have to do the work a little bit, but it's nice. I'm enjoying it. And what we're starting with today is the Robber Bridegroom. So let's get comfy. I'm gonna have one more sip. The Robber Bridegroom. There was once a miller who had one beautiful daughter, and as she was grown up, he was anxious that she should be well married and provided for. He said to himself, I will give her to the first suitable man who comes and asks for her hand. Not long after, a suitor appeared, and as he appeared to be very rich, and the miller could see nothing in him with which to find fault, he betrothed his daughter to him. But the girl did not care for the man, as a girl ought to care for her betrothed husband. She did not feel that she could trust him, and she could not look at him nor think of him without an inward shudder. One day he said to her, You have not yet paid me a visit, although we have been betrothed for some time. I do not know where your house is, she answered. Oh, my house is out there in the dark forest, he said. She tried to excuse herself by saying that she would not be able to find the way thither. Her betrothed only replied, You must come and see me next Sunday. I have already invited guests for that day, and that you may not mistake the way, I will strew ashes along the path. When Sunday came, and it was time for the girl to start, a feeling of dread came over her which she could not explain, and that she might be able to find her path again, she filled her pockets with peas and lentils to sprinkle on the ground as she went along. On reaching the entrance to the forest, she found the path strewed with ashes, and these she followed, throwing down some peas on either side of her at every step she took. She walked the whole day until she came to the deepest, darkest part of the forest. There she saw a lonely house, looking so grim and mysterious that it did not please her at all. She stepped inside, but not a soul was to be seen, and a great silence reigned throughout. Suddenly a voice cried, turn back, young maiden fair, linger not in this murderer's lair. The girl looked up, and saw that the voice came from a bird hanging in a cage on the wall. Again it cried, turn back, young maiden fair, linger not in this murderer's lair. The girl passed on, going from room to room of the house, but they were all empty, and still she saw no one. At last she came to the cellar, and there sat a very, very old woman, who could not keep her head from shaking. Can you tell me, asked the girl, if my betrothed husband lives here? "Ah, you poor child," answered the old woman. "What a place for you to come to! This is a murderer's den. You think yourself a promised bride, and that your marriage will soon take place. But it is with death that you will keep your marriage feast. Look, do you see that large cauldron of water which I am obliged to keep on fire? As soon as they have you in their power, they will kill you without mercy, and cook and eat you, for they are eaters of men. If I did not take pity on you and save you, you would be lost." Thereupon, the old woman led her behind a large cask, which quite hid her from view. "Keep as still as a mouse," she said. "Do not move or speak, or it will be all over with you. Tonight, when the robbers are all asleep, we will flee together. I have long been waiting for an opportunity to escape." The words were hardly out of her mouth when the godless crew returned, dragging another young girl along with them. They were all drunk, and paid no heed to her cries and lamentations. They gave her wine to drink, 3 glasses full, 1 of white wine, 1 of red, and 1 of yellow. And with that, her heart gave way, and she died. Then they tore off her dainty clothing, laid her on the table, and cut her beautiful body into pieces, and sprinkled salt upon it. The poor betrothed girl crouched trembling and shuddering behind the cask, for she saw what a terrible fate had been intended for her by the robbers. One of them now noticed a gold ring still remaining on the little finger of the murdered girl, and as he could not draw it off easily, he took a hatchet and cut off the finger. But the finger sprang into the air and fell behind the cask into the lap of the girl who was hiding there. The robber took a light and began looking for it, but he could not find it. "Have you looked behind the large cask?" said one of the others. But the old woman called out, "Come, eat your suppers, and let the thing be till tomorrow. The finger won't run away." "The old woman is right," said the robbers, and they ceased looking for the finger and sat down. The old woman then mixed a sleeping draught with their wine, and before long they were all lying on the floor of the cellar, fast asleep and snoring. As soon as the girl was assured of this, she came from behind the cask. She was obliged to step over the bodies of the sleepers who were lying close together, and every moment she was filled with renewed dread lest she should wake them. But God helped her, so that she passed safely over them, and then she and the old woman went upstairs, opened the door, and hastened as fast as they could from the murderer's den. They found the ashes scattered by the wind, but the peas and lentils had sprouted and grown sufficiently above the ground to guide them in the moonlight along the path. All night long they walked, and it was morning before they reached the mill. Then the girl told her father all that had happened. The day came that had been fixed for the marriage. The bridegroom arrived, and also a large company of guests, for the miller had taken care to invite all his friends and relations. As they sat at the feast, each guest in turn was asked to tell a tale. The bride sat still and did not say a word. "And you, my love," said the bridegroom, turning to her, "is there no tale you know? Tell us something." "I will tell you a dream, then," said the bride. "I went alone through a forest, and came at last to a house. Not a soul could I find within, but a bird that was hanging in a cage on the wall cried, 'Turn back, young maiden fair, linger not in this murderer's lair.' And again, a second time, it said these words, 'My darling, this is only a dream.' I went on through the house, from room to room, but they were all empty, and everything was so grim and mysterious. At last I went down to the cellar, and there sat a very, very old woman who could not keep her head still. I asked her if my betrothed lived here, and she said, 'Ah, you poor child, you come to a murderer's den. Your betrothed does indeed live here. but he will kill you without mercy, and afterwards cook and eat you. My darling, this is only a dream. The old woman hid me behind a large cask, and scarcely had she done this when the robbers returned home, dragging a young girl along with them. They gave her 3 kinds of wine to drink, white, red, and yellow, and with that she died. My darling, this is only a dream. Then they tore off her dainty clothing and cut her beautiful body into pieces and sprinkled salt upon it. My darling, this is only a dream. And one of the robbers saw that there was a gold ring still left on her finger, and as it was difficult to draw off, he took a hatchet and cut off the finger, but the finger sprang into the air and fell behind the great cask into my lap. And here is the finger with the ring. And with these words, the bride drew forth the finger and showed it to the assembled guests. The bridegroom, who during this recital had grown deadly pale, up and tried to escape, but the guests seized him and held him fast. They delivered him up to justice, and he and all his murderous band were condemned to death for their wicked deeds. The end. Moral of the story, have a bird outside of your home to warn you who is and who is not a murderer. So we have this girl who is betrothed to this miller, and she just doesn't feel right. Like, there's something off about him, and he invites her to his place. He's having people over. She should go over there. They are to be married. So she goes there, and there's a bird outside that's like, excuse me, pretty lady, leave. These people are murderers. And he says it twice, and then she goes into the house, and nobody's there, and she's wandering around, and an old woman is there, and is like, these people will kill you, chop you up, and eat you. I'm gonna hide you, and then we shall both escape. And while they're, like, getting ready, they return. Like, the men return, and they have this girl that they kill and chop up, and like a finger flings off, and our narrator picks it up and keeps it. And then when she leaves, like the next day, they're all like gathered around. She tells her dad exactly what has happened and why she's not going to marry him. And then they're all telling stories, and she's like, well, this is my story. And that each interruption, it's like, my dear, this is only a dream. This didn't happen. And then at the end, she holds up the finger, and then they grab the miller, and then justice. Next up is Tom Thumb. A poor woodman sat in his cottage one night, smoking his pipe by the fireside, while his wife sat by his side, spinning. "How lonely it is, wife," said he, as he puffed out a long curl of smoke, "for you and me to sit here by ourselves, without any children to play about and amuse us, while other people seem so happy and merry with their children." "What you say is very true," said the wife, sighing and turning round her wheel. "How happy should I be if I had but one child! If it were ever so small, nay, if it were no bigger than my thumb, I should be very happy and love it dearly." Now, odd as you may think it, it came to pass that this good woman's wish was fulfilled, just in the very way she had wished it, for not long afterwards she had a little boy, who was quite healthy and strong, but was not much bigger than my thumb. So they said, "Well, we cannot say we have not got what we wished for, and little as he is, we will love him dearly." And they called him Thomas Thumb. They gave him plenty of food, yet for all they could do, he never grew bigger, but kept just the same size as he had been when he was born. Still, his eyes were sharp and sparkling, and he soon showed himself to be a clever little fellow, who always knew well what he was about. One day, As the woodman was getting ready to go into the wood to cut fuel, he said, "I wish I had someone to bring the cart after me, for I want to make haste." "Oh, father," cried Tom, "I will take care of that. The cart shall be in the wood by the time you want it." And the woodman laughed and said, "Well, how can that be? You cannot reach up to the horse's bridle." "Never mind that, father," said Tom. "If my mother will only harness the horse, I will get into his ear and tell him which way to go." "Well," said the father, "we will try for once." When the time came, the mother harnessed the horse to the cart and put Tom into his ear, and as he sat there, the little man told the beast how to go, crying out, "Go on," and "Stop," as he wanted, and thus the horse went on just as well as if the woodman had driven it himself into the wood. It happened that as the horse was going a little too fast, and Tom was calling out, "Gently, gently," two strangers came up. "What an odd thing that is," said one. "There's a cart going along, and I hear a carter talking to the horse, but yet I see no one." "That is strange indeed," said the other. "Let us follow the cart and see where it goes." So they went on into the wood, till at last they came to the place where the woodman was. Then Tom Thumb, seeing his father, cried out, "See, father, here I am with the cart, all right and safe. Now take me down." So his father took hold of the horse with one hand, and with the other took his son out of the horse's ear, and put him down upon a straw, where he sat as merry as you please. The two strangers were all this time looking on, and did not know what to say for wonder. At last one took the other aside and said, "That little urchin will make our fortune if we can get him, and carry him about from town to town as a show. We must buy him." So they went up to the woodman and asked him what he would take for the little man. "He will be better off," said they, "with us than with you." "Well, I won't sell him at all," said the father. "My own flesh and blood is dearer to me than all the silver and gold in the world." But Tom, hearing of the bargain they wanted to make, crept up to his father's coat to his shoulder and whispered in his ear, "Take the money, father, and let them have me. I'll soon come back to you." So the woodman at last said he would sell Tom to the strangers for a large piece of gold, and they paid the price. "Where would you like to sit?" said one of them. "Oh, put me on the rim of your hat. That will be a nice gallery for me. I can walk about there and see the country as we go along." So they did as he wished, and when Tom had taken leave of his father, they took him away with them. They journeyed on till it began to be dusky, and then the little man said, "Let me get down. I'm tired." So the man took off his hat and put him down on a clod of earth in a ploughed field by the side of the road. But Tom ran about amongst the furrows, and at last slipped into an old mouse-hole. "Good night, my masters," said he. "I'm off. Mind and look sharp after me the next time." Then they ran at once to the place and poked the ends of their sticks into the mouse-hole, but all in vain. Tom only crawled farther and farther in, and at last it became quite dark, so that they were forced to go their way without their prize, as sulky as could be. When Tom found they were gone, he came out of his hiding place. "What dangerous walking it is," said he, "in this ploughed field. If I were to fall from one of these great clods, I should undoubtedly break my neck." At last, by good luck, he found a large, empty snail shell. "This is lucky," said he. "I can sleep here very well." And in he crept. Just as he was falling asleep, he heard two men passing by, chatting together, and one said to the other, "How can we rob that rich parson's house of his silver and gold?" "Well, I'll tell you," said Tom. "What noise was that?" said the thief friend. "Well, I'm sure I heard someone speak." They stood still, listening, and Tom said, "Take me with you, and I'll soon show you how to get the parson's money." "But where are you?" said they. "Look on the ground," answered he, "and listen where the sound comes from." At last the thieves found him out, and lifted him up in their hands. "You little urchin," they said, "what can you do for us?" "Why, I can get between the iron window bars of the parson's house, and throw you out whatever you want." That's a good thought," said the thieves. "Come along, we shall see what you can do." When they came to the parson's house, Tom slipped through the window bars into the room, and then called out as loud as he could bawl, "Will you have all that is here?" At this the thieves were frightened, and said softly, "Softly, speak low, that you may not waken everybody." But Tom seemed as if he did not understand them, and bawled out again, "How much will you have? Shall I throw it all out?" Now the cook lay in the next room, and hearing a noise, she raised herself up in bed and listened. Meantime the thieves were frightened, and ran off a little way, but at last they plucked up their hearts and said, "The little urchin is only trying to make fools of us." So they came back and whispered softly to him, saying, "Now let us have no more of your roguish jokes, but throw us out some of the money." Then Tom called out as loud as he could, "Very well, hold your hands. Here it comes." The cook heard this quite plain, so she sprang out of bed and ran to open the door. The thieves ran off as if a wolf was on their tails, and the maid, having groped about and found nothing, went away for a light. By the time she came back, Tom had slipped off into the barn, and when she had looked about and searched every hole and corner, and found nobody, she went to bed, thinking she must have been dreaming, with her eyes open. The little man crawled about in the hayloft, and at last found a snug place to finish his night's rest in. So he laid himself down, meaning to sleep till daylight, and then find his way home to his father and mother. But alas, how woefully he was undone! What crosses and sorrows happen to us all in this world! The cook got up early, before daybreak, to feed the cows, and going straight to the hayloft, carried away a large bundle of hay, with the little man in the middle of it, fast asleep. He still, however, slept on, and did not wake till he found himself in the mouth of the cow, for the cook had put the hay into the cow's rick, and the cow had taken Tom up in a mouthful of it. "Good lack-a-day," said he, "how came I to tumble into the mill?" But he soon found out where he really was, and was forced to have all his wits about him, that he might not get between the cow's teeth, and so be crushed to death. At last down he went into her stomach. "It is rather dark," said he. "They forgot to build windows in this room to let the sun in. A candle would be no bad thing." Though he made the best of his bad luck, he did not like his quarters at all, and the worst of it was that more and more hay was always coming down, and the space left for him became smaller and smaller. At last he cried out as loud as he could, "Don't bring me any more hay! Don't bring me any more hay!" The maid happened to be just then milking the cow, and hearing someone speak, but seeing nobody, and yet being quite sure it was the same voice that she had heard in the night, she was so frightened that she fell off her stool, and overset the milk pail. As soon as she could pick herself up out of the dirt, she ran off as fast as she could to her mother and parson, and said, Sir, the cow is talking." But parson said, "Woman, thou art surely mad." However, he went with her into the cow-house to try and see what was the matter. Scarcely had they set foot on the threshold when Tom called out, "Don't bring me any more hay." Then the parson himself was frightened, and thinking the cow was surely bewitched, told his man to kill her on the spot. So the cow was killed and cut up, and the stomach in which Tom lay was thrown out upon a dunghill. Tom soon set himself to work to get out, which was not a very easy task, but at last, just as he had made room to get his head out, fresh ill luck befell him. A hungry wolf sprang out and swallowed up the whole stomach with Tom in it, at one gulp, and ran away. Tom, however, was still not disheartened, and thinking the wolf would not dislike having some chat with him as he was going along, he called out, "My good friend, I can show you a famous treat." "Where's that?" said the wolf. "In such and such a house," said Tom, describing his own father's house. "You can crawl through the drain into the kitchen, and then into the pantry, and there you will find cakes, ham, beef, cold chicken, roast pig, apple dumplings, and everything that your heart can wish." The wolf did not want to be asked twice. So, that very night, he went to the house and crawled through the drain into the kitchen, and then into the pantry, and ate and drank there to his heart's content. As soon as he had had enough, he wanted to get away, but he had eaten so much that he could not go out by the same way he came in. This was just what Tom had reckoned upon, and now he began to set up a great shout, making all the noise he could. "Will you be easy?" said the wolf. "You'll awaken everybody in the house if you make such a clatter." "What's that to me?" said the little man. "You have had your frolic, now I've a mind to be merry myself." And he began singing and shouting as loud as he could. The woodman and his wife, being awakened by the noise, peeped through a crack in the door. But when they saw a wolf was there, you may well suppose that they were sadly frightened, and the woodman ran for his axe and gave his wife a scythe. "Do you stand behind," said the woodman, "and when I have knocked him on the head, you must rip him up with the scythe." Tom heard all this and cried out, "Father, father, I am here. The wolf has swallowed me." And his father said, "Oh, heavens be praised, we have found our dear child again." And he told his wife not to use the scythe for fear she should hurt him. Then he aimed a great blow and struck the wolf on the head and killed him on the spot. And when he was dead, they cut open his body and set Tommy free. "Ah," said the father, "what fears we have had for you." "Yes, father," answered he, "I have traveled all over the world, I think, in one way or another, since we parted, and now I am very glad to come home and get fresh air again." "Why, where have you been?" said his father. "I have been in a mouse hole, and in a snail shell, and down a cow's throat, and in the wolf's belly, and yet here I am again, safe and sound." "Well," said they, "you are come back, and we will not sell you again for all the riches in the world." Then they hugged and kissed their dear little son, and gave him plenty to eat and drink, for he was very hungry. And then they fetched new clothes for him, for his old clothes had been quite spoiled on his journey. So Master Thumb stayed at home with his father and mother in peace, for though he had been so great a traveler, and had done and seen so many fine things, and was fond enough of telling the whole story, he always agreed that, after all, there's no place like home. End of the story. I was just imagining him clicking his little ruby slippers. "There's no place like home. There's no place like home." It's like, oh wait, wrong story. All right. So we have oh, thank you, Kitsuna. Thank you for the hydrate. We have a husband and wife who are childless, and they wish desperately for a child. And they're like, you know what? I would even have the smallest of small children, even if this child was no bigger than my thumb. And then lo and behold, they get a child who is teensy tiny, no bigger than her thumb. And he never gets any bigger. And one day he's helping his father, and there's two men who notice what is going on, and they're like, "Hey, sell us this child, and we will take him out of your, like, off of your hair. We'll give you all of this money," and blah, blah, blah. Their plan is to, like, travel around and, like, have him as, like, a freak show. and get money from people that way. And the dad's like, I would never, could never. And Tom is like, no, you probably should, like, take the money. So the dad does, and Tom ends up escaping, but somehow um gets like stuck and then convinces these robbers to like go and rob this house, and he's helping them, but not really, because he's like shouting so loud that he wakes up the cook and frightens the robbers away. And then he gets caught in the hay because he's going to sleep in the hayloft for the night. He gets caught in the hay and a cow eats him. And then, so he's making noise in there. They think that the cow is actually talking and bewitched. So they kill the cow, and he's still in the stomach. And this wolf eats the stomach. So now he's in this wolf's stomach. And he convinces the wolf that he knows exactly where to go. He just has to go to this house, which is his old house. And he has to go through these means. And then there's going to be so much food for him. And so the wolf is like, heck yeah, I'm going to do that. So he goes in there, he lets the wolf eat all of the food, and then he starts just being loud. And the wolf is like, dude, shut up. They're going to wake up. And the Tom is like, well, I'm just going to be loud and obnoxious, and I'm just going to sing to my little heart's content. And his parents wake up, they come downstairs, they are going to kill the wolf because he's eaten like all of their food. And Tom is like, Papa, it's me, I'm inside. And they're like, okay, cool, we won't use the scythe. So they kill the wolf, they chop it, they like cut him open, get Tom out. And Tom is like, it's good to be home. Rumpelstiltskin. Get cozy. There we go. By the side of a wood, in a country a long way off, ran a fine stream of water. And upon the stream there stood a mill. The miller's house was close by, and the miller, you must know, had a very beautiful daughter. She was, moreover, very shrewd and clever, and the miller was so proud of her that he one day told the king of the land, who used to come and hunt in the wood, that his daughter could pin gold out of straw. Now, this king was very fond of money, and when he heard the miller's boast, his greediness was raised, and he sent for the girl to be brought before him. Then he led her to a chamber in his palace, where there was a great heap of straw, and gave her a spinning wheel, and said, all this must be spun into gold before morning, as you love your life. It was in vain that the poor maiden said that it was only a silly boast of her father, for that she could do no such thing as spin straw into gold. The chamber door was locked, and she was left alone. She sat down in one corner of the room and began to bewail her hard fate, when on a sudden the door opened, and a droll-looking little man hobbled in and said, Good morrow to you, my good lass. What are you weeping for? Oh, alas, said she, I must spin this straw into gold, and I know not how. What will you give me, said the hobgoblin, to do it for you? My necklace, replied the maiden. He took her at her word, and sat himself down to the wheel, and whistled and sang, round about, lo and behold, reel away, straw into gold. And round about the wheel went merrily. The work was quickly done, and the straw was all spun into gold. When the king came and saw this, he was greatly astonished and pleased, but his heart grew still more greedy of gain, and so he shut up the poor miller's daughter again with a fresh task. Then she knew not what to do, and sat down once more to weep, but the dwarf soon opened the door and said, What will you give me to do your task? The ring on my finger, said she. So her little friend took the ring, and began to work at the wheel again, and whistled and sang, round about, lo and behold, reel away, straw into gold. Till long before morning, all was done again. The king was greatly delighted to see all this glittering treasure, but still he had not enough. So he took the miller's daughter to a yet larger heap and said, "All this must be spun tonight, and if it is, you shall be my queen." As soon as she was alone, that dwarf came in and said, "What will you give me to spin gold for you this third time?" "I have nothing left," said she. "Then say you will give me," said the little man, "the first child that you may have when you are queen." "That may never be," thought the miller's daughter, and as she knew no other way to get her task done, she said she would do what he asked. Round went the wheel again to the old song, and the mannikin once more spun the heap into gold. The king came in the morning, and, finding all he wanted, was forced to keep his word. So he married the miller's daughter, and she really became queen. At the birth of her first little child, she was very glad, and forgot the dwarf, and what she had said. But one day he came into her room, where she was sitting playing with her baby, and put her in mind of it. Then she grieved sorely at her misfortune, and said she would give him all the wealth of the kingdom if he would let her off, but in vain. Till at last her tears softened him, and he said, "I will give you 3 days' grace, and if during that time you tell me my name, you shall keep your child." Now the queen lay awake all night, thinking of all the odd names that she had ever heard, and she sent messengers all over the land to find out new ones. The next day came, and she began with Timothy, Ichabod, Benjamin, Jeremiah, and all the names she could remember. But to all and each of them he said, "Madam, that is not my name." The second day she began with all the comical names she had heard of, Bandy-legs, Hunchback, Crookshanks, and so on. But the little gentleman still said to every one of them, "Madam, that is not my name." The third day one of the messengers came back and said, "I have traveled 2 days without hearing of any other names, but yesterday, as I was climbing a high hill among the trees of the forest, where the fox and the hare bid each other good night, I saw a little hut, and before the hut burnt a fire, and round about the fire a funny little dwarf was dancing upon one leg and singing, 'Merrily the feast I'll make, today I'll brew, tomorrow I'll bake. Merrily I'll dance and sing, for next day will a stranger bring. Little does my lady dream, Rumpelstiltskin is my name.'" When the queen heard this, she jumped for joy, and as soon as her little friend came, she sat down upon her throne and called all her court round to enjoy the fun. And the nurse stood by her side with the baby in her arms, as if it was quite ready to be given up. Then the little man began to chuckle at the thought of having the poor child to take home with him to his hut in the woods, and he cried out, "Now, lady, what is my name?" "Is it John?" asked she. "No, madam." "Is it Tom?" "No, madam." "Is it Jemmy?" "It is not." "Can your name be Rumpelstiltskin?" said the lady slyly. "Some witch told you that! Some witch told you that!" cried the little man, and dashed his right foot in a rage so deep into the floor that he was forced to lay hold of it with both hands to pull it out. Then he made the best of his way off, while the nurse laughed, and the baby crowed, and all the court jeered at him for having had so much trouble for nothing, and said, "We wish you a very good morning, and a merry feast, Mr. Rumpelstiltskin." The end. Was that a good ending? Was that a happy ending? Or was that a not happy ending. There was an audience. She called people to watch this. What is this story? She called people to watch the gotcha moment. Okay, so we have this Miller, and his daughter is just super beautiful, and she's just really good at spinning. And his dad is just like bragging about it and saying like, "Oh, she spins the straw into gold," and the king is like, "Gold, you say? Gimme." And so she is forced to turn all of the straw into gold. She has no idea what she's doing, and she just starts crying because the king is like, "If you don't do it, I'll kill you." And she's like, "All right, well, holy crap, what am I gonna do?" She starts crying. This little man hobbles out, and he's like, "Why are you crying?" And she explains everything, and he's like, "All right, what are you gonna give me in order for me to do this?" And she's like, "I will give you my necklace." And he's like, "Deal." So he does it. The next day, the king is just super happy, and he's like, "I want more." So then he puts her in front of a bigger pile, and she just starts crying again because there's no way she couldn't do a little pile. How is she supposed to do a bigger pile? And so same thing happens. She promises to give her ring. So he takes the ring, spins it into gold, blah blah blah. The very next day, the king is like, "Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Love this. I will marry you if you do this whole massive pile of straw into gold." And the queen is like, okay. And she just starts crying again. And Rumpelstiltskin comes out and is like, "What ails you?" And so she says it, and she doesn't have anything else to give. And he's like, "Okay, I will do all of this if, when you're queen, you give me your firstborn child." And she's like, "That's not gonna happen." And he's like, "Okay, but you have to like promise." And she's like, "Deal." So they make the deal. It happens. He spins it into gold, and the queen, or she marries the king, becomes queen. They have a kid. Rumpelstiltskin comes out and is like, "Give me the baby." And she's like, "Oh no, I won't do it. It's my baby." And he's like, "All right, I will take pity on you. I will give you 3 days grace, as well as some mercy. If you can guess my name in 3 days, you can keep your baby." And so she's like, "Holy crap, okay, I'm gonna send these messengers out." And so the first 2 days, she's just like naming names, and each time he's like, "That is definitely not my name." And so the third day, a messenger comes back and is like, "So, funny thing, I saw this little hut. I walked up to it. There was this silly little person who was dancing around. This is what he was singing, and he like spoke to himself in the third person. His name is Rumpelstiltskin." And she's like, "Excellent. Everybody gather round. I want you to see the fool, the absolute fool I'm about to make of this person." So Rumpelstiltskin rolls up, super confident that he's going to take the baby. And so she's like, "Is it this?" He's like, "No." "Is it this?" "No." "Is it Rumpelstiltskin?" And he's so mad, he like stomps the ground. He has to like use both of his arms to like pull his leg out of the ground. And then he just like hobbles away, and people point and laugh at him. And she gets to keep the baby. The end. The girl's a player. Let's see, let's see. Also, oh no, never mind. Just kidding. Just kidding. Next up is Clever Gretel. Okay, it is not the same Gretel as like Hansel and Gretel. I like, with mine eyes, I looked. No. Okay. There was once a cook named Gretel who wore shoes with red heels, and when she walked out with them on, she turned herself this way and that, was quite happy, and thought, "You certainly are a pretty girl." And when she came home, she drank, in her gladness of heart, a draught of wine. And as wine excites a desire to eat, she tasted the best of whatever she was cooking, until she was satisfied, and said, "The cook must know what the food is like." It came to pass that the master one day said to her, "Gretel, there is a guest coming this evening. Prepare me 2 fowls very daintily." "I will see to it, master," answered Gretel. She killed 2 fowls, scalded them, plucked them, put them on the spit, and towards evening set them before the fire, that they might roast. The fowls began to turn brown, and were nearly ready, but the guest had not yet arrived. Then Gretel called out to the master, "If the guest does not come, I must take the fowls away from the fire, but it will be a sin and a shame if they are not eaten the moment they are their juiciest." The master said, "I will run myself and fetch the guest." When the master had turned his back, Gretel laid the spit with the fowls on one side and thought, "Standing so long by the fire there makes me sweat and thirsty. Who knows when they will come? Meanwhile, I will run into the cellar and take a drink." She ran down, set a jug, and said, "God bless it for you, Gretel," and took a good drink, and thought that wine should flow on and should not be interrupted, and took yet another hearty draught. Then she went and put the fowls down again to the fire, basted them, and drove the spit merrily around. But as the roast meat smelt so good, Gretel thought, something might be wrong. It ought to be tasted. She touched it with her finger and said, "Ah, how good fowls are! It certainly is a sin and a shame that they are not eaten at the right time." She ran to the window to see if the master was not coming with his guest, but she saw no one, and went back to the fowls and thought, "One of the wings is burning. I had better take it off and eat it." So she cut it off, ate it, and enjoyed it. And when she had done, she thought, "The other must go too, or else master will observe that something is missing." When the 2 wings were eaten, she went and looked for her master, and did not see him. It suddenly occurred to her, who knows? They are perhaps not coming at all, and have turned in somewhere. Then she said, "Well, Gretel, enjoy yourself. One fowl has been cut into. Take another drink and eat it up entirely. When it is eaten, you will have some peace. Why should God's good gifts be spoilt?" So she ran into the cellar again, took an enormous drink, and ate up the one chicken in great glee. When one of the chickens was swallowed down, and still her master did not come, Gretel looked at the other and said, "That one is. The other should be likewise. The 2 go together. What's right for the one is right for the other. I think if I were to take another draught, it would do me no harm." So she took another hearty drink, and let the second chicken follow the first. While she was making the most of it, the master came and cried, "Hurry up, Gretel, the guest is coming directly after me." "Yes, sir, I will soon serve up," answered Gretel. Meantime, the master looked to see that the table was properly laid, and took the great knife, wherewith he was going to carve the chickens, and sharpened it on the steps. Presently the guest came and knocked politely and courteously at the house door. Gretel ran and looked to see who was there, and when she saw the guest, she put her finger to her lips and said, "Shh, hush, go away as quickly as you can. If my master catches you, it will be the worst for you. He certainly did not ask you to supper, but his intention is to cut off your 2 ears. Just listen how he is sharpening the knife for it." The guest heard the sharpening, and hurried down the steps again as fast as he could. Gretel was not idle. She ran screaming to her master and cried, "You have invited a fine guest." "Why, Gretel, what do you mean by that?" "Yes," she said, "he has taken the chickens, which I was just going to serve, off the dish, and has run away with them." "That's a nice trick," said the master, and lamented the fine chickens. If he had but left me one, so that something remained for me to eat." He called to him to stop, but the guest pretended not to hear. Then he ran after him with the knife still in his hand, crying, "Just one, just one," meaning that the guest should leave him just one chicken, and not take both. The guest, however, thought no otherwise than that he was going to give up one of his ears, and ran as if fire were burning under him, in order to take them both with him. Short and sweet. All right, so this one we have Gretel, who is a cook and who is very full of herself. She's like, I am a great cook, and she knows it. And so the king one day is like, hey, I'm gonna have a guest, so bring up 2 fowls, and it will be a great feast that we shall have. And so she fixes up the fowls, and she goes to the king, and she's like, hey, it's almost ready, and like it's best to serve if the fowl is like at its best, at its peak bestness. And so the king is like, oh no, he's not here yet. I will go get him. And Greta's like, great. Or Gretel is like, great, go do that. And as he's gone, she's like, I'm gonna have something to drink. And so she has a drink, and she's like, that wing looks pretty good. So she cuts off one of the wings of the birds and eats them. And is like, oh, I should take the other wing because it only makes sense. So she cuts off the other one. And then she just ends up eating the chicken. And she's like, well, I already ate one. I might as well eat the other one. So then she eats the other chicken. And then the king comes back and he's like, Gretel, get everything ready. The guest is right behind me. And so Gretel, so smart that she is, as the king is like ensuring that everything is set up in the dining room, Gretel goes and talks to the guest and is like, oh my god, the king is going to cut off your ears. And the king is like sharpening a knife because he's sharpening the knife to cut into the chicken that he thinks that he's going to be having. And so the guest freaks out, runs away. Gretel goes and tells the king, like, hey, your guest left. Rude. The king is like, oh my god, and runs after him with the knife and is like, oh, Gretel said that he ran away with the chickens too, which is why they don't have any chickens. And the king is like, oh my god, he couldn't have even left me one. So he runs after him with a knife. And he's like, just one, just one. Like, I just want one. And the guy who's running, the guest, is thinking that he is just talking about like cutting off just one ear instead of two. And so he like pretends that he doesn't hear him and just like moseys a little faster. Hilarious. Hilarious. And Gretel gets away with it. So smart. So smart. The Old Man and His Grandson. There was once a very old man, whose eyes had become dim, his ears dull of hearing, his knees trembled, and when he sat at table he could hardly hold the spoon, and spilt the broth upon the tablecloth, or let it run out of his mouth. His son and his wife and his son's wife were disgusted at this. So the old grandfather at last had to sit in the corner behind the stove, and they gave him his food in an earthenware bowl, and not even enough of it. And he used to look towards the table with his eyes full of tears. Once, too, his trembling hands could not hold the bowl, and it fell to the ground and broke. The young wife scolded him, but he said nothing, and only sighed. Then they brought him a wooden bowl for a few halfpence, out of which he had to eat. They were once sitting thus when the little grandson of 4 years old began to gather together some bits of wood upon the ground. "What are you doing there?" asked the father. "I am making a little trough," answered the child, "for father and mother to eat out of when I am big." The man and his wife looked at each other for a while, and presently began to cry. Then they took the old grandfather to the table, and henceforth always let him eat with them, and likewise said nothing if he did spill a little of anything. I told you it was short. All right, treat your elders nicely. It's like a cycle, almost like the golden rule. So stinking short. And scene. Yeah. So there's this old man who is losing function, losing eyesight, losing hearing, all of these things. And he's starting to like dribble when he eats. And his son and wife are like, "You are disgusting." And so they put him out of sight, out of mind. And It's terrible. And one day, their son is gathering sticks, and the papa is like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "Well, I'm gathering sticks so that I can make a trough for you when you become old and can't eat normally." And the parents are distraught. And so they bring the grandpa back to the table. And they don't say anything about him dropping anything. The Little Peasant. There was a certain village wherein no one lived but really rich peasants, and just one poor one, whom they called the Little Peasant. He had not even so much as a cow, and still less money to buy one, and yet he and his wife did so wish to have one. One day, he said to her, "Listen, I have a good idea. There is our gossip, the carpenter. He shall make us a wooden calf and paint it brown, so that it looks like any other, and in time it will certainly get big and be a cow." The woman also liked the idea, and their gossip, the carpenter, cut and planed the calf and painted it as it ought to be, and made it with its head hanging down as if it were eating. Next morning, when the cows were being driven out, the little peasant called the cowherd in and said, "Look, I have a little calf here, but it is still small and has to be carried." The cowherd said, "All right," and took it in his arms and carried it to the pasture and set it among the grass. The little calf always remained standing like one which was eating, and the cowherd said, but the little peasant stood at his door and waited for his little calf. And when the cowherd drove the cows through the village and the calf was missing, he inquired where it was. The cowherd answered, "It is still standing out there, eating. It would not stop and come with us." But the little peasant said, "Oh, but I must have my beast back again." Then they went back to the meadow together, but someone had stolen the calf, and it was gone. The cowherd said, "Must have run away." The peasant, however, said, "Don't tell me that," and led the cowherd before the mayor, who, for his carelessness, condemned him to give the peasant a cow for the calf which had run away. And now the little peasant and his wife had the cow for which they had so long wished, and they were heartily glad, but they had no food for it, and could give it nothing to eat. So it soon had to be killed. They salted the flesh, and the peasant went into the town and wanted to sell the skin there, so that he might buy a new calf with the proceeds. On the way he passed by a mill, and there sat a raven with broken wings, and out of pity he took him and wrapped him in the skin. But as the weather grew so bad, and there was a storm of rain and wind, he could go no farther, and turned back to the mill and begged for shelter. The miller's wife was alone in the house, and said to the peasant, "Lay yourself on the straw there," and gave him a slice of bread and cheese. The peasant ate it, and lay down with his skin beside him, and the woman thought, "Oh, he is tired, and has gone to sleep." In the meantime came the parson. The miller's wife received him well, and said, "My husband is out, so we will have a feast." The peasant listened, and when he heard them talk about feasting he was vexed that he had been forced to make shift with a slice of bread and cheese. Then the woman served up 4 different things: roast meat, salad, cakes, and wines. Just as they were about to sit down and eat, there was a knocking outside. The woman said, "Oh, heavens, it is my husband." She quickly hid the roast meat inside the tiled stove, the wine under the pillow, the salad on the bed, the cakes under it, and the parson in the closet on the porch. Then she opened the door for her husband and said, "Thank heaven you are back again. There is such a storm, it looks as if the world were coming to an end." The miller saw the peasant lying on the straw and said, "What's that fellow doing there?" "Ah," said the wife, "the poor knave came in the storm and rain, and begged for shelter, so I gave him a bit of bread and cheese and showed him where the straw was. The man said, I have no objection, but be quick and get me something to eat. The woman said, But I have nothing but bread and cheese. I am contented with anything, replied the husband. So far as I am concerned, bread and cheese will do. And looked at the peasant and said, Come and eat some more with me. The peasant did not require to be invited twice, but got up and ate. After this the miller saw the skin in which the raven was, lying on the ground, and said, What have you there? The peasant answered, I have a soothsayer inside it. Can he foretell anything to me? Said the miller. Why not? Answered the peasant. But he only says 4 things, and the 5th he keeps to himself. The miller was curious, and said, Let him foretell something for once. Then the peasant pinched the raven's head so that he croaked and made a noise like grr, grr. The miller said, What did he say? The peasant said, In the first place, he says that there is some wine hidden under the pillow. Bless me, said the miller, and went there and found the wine. Go on, said he. The peasant made the raven croak again and said, In the second place, he says there is some roasted meat in the tiled stove. Well, upon my word, cried the miller, and went thither and found the roast meat. The peasant made the raven prophesy still more, and said, Thirdly, he says that there is some salad on the bed. That would be a fine thing, cried the miller, and went there and found the salad. At last the peasant pinched the raven once more till he croaked, and said, Fourthly, he says that there are some cakes under the bed. That would be a fine thing, said the miller, and looked there, and found the cakes. And now the two sat down to the table together, but the miller's wife was frightened to death, and went to bed, and took all the keys with her. The miller would have liked much to know the 5th, but the little peasant said, First, we will quickly eat the 4 things, for the 5th is something bad. So they ate, and after they bargained how much the miller was to give for the 5th prophecy, until they agreed on $300. Then the peasant once more pinched the raven's head till he croaked loudly. The miller said, What did he say? The peasant replied, He says that the devil is hiding outside there in the closet on the porch. The miller said, The devil must go out, and opened the house door. Then the woman was forced to give up the keys, and the peasant unlocked the closet. The parson ran out as fast as he could, and the miller said, It was true. I saw him with my own eyes. The peasant, however, made off next morning by daybreak with the 300 thalers. At home the small peasant gradually launched out. He built a beautiful house, and the peasant said, The small peasant has certainly been to the place where golden snow falls, and people carry the gold home in shovels. Then the small peasant was brought before the mayor, and bidden to say from whence his wealth came. He answered, I sold my cow's skin in the town for $300. Then the peasants heard that. They too wished to enjoy this great profit, and ran home, killed all their cows, and stripped off their skins in order to sell them in the town to the greatest advantage. The mayor, however, said, But my servant must go first. When she came to the merchant in town, he did not give her more than $2 for the skin, and when the others came, he did not give them so much, and said, What can I do with all of these skins? Then the peasants were vexed that the small peasant should have thus outwitted them, wanted to take vengeance on him, and accused him of this treachery before the mayor. The innocent little peasant was unanimously sentenced to death, and was to be rolled into the river in a barrel pierced full of holes. He was led forth, and a priest was brought who was to say a mass for his soul. The others were all obliged to retire to a distance, and when the peasant looked at the priest, he recognized the man who had been with the miller's wife. He said to him, I set you free from the closet. Set me free from the barrel. At this same moment up came, with a flock of sheep, the very shepherd whom the peasant knew had long been wishing to be a mayor. So he cried with all of his might, "No, I will not do it. If the whole world insists on it, I will not do it." The shepherd, hearing that, came up to him and asked, "What are you about? What is it you will not do?" The peasant said, "They want to make me mayor, if I will put myself in the barrel, but I will not do it." The shepherd said, "If nothing more than that is needful in order to be mayor, I would get into the barrel at once." The peasant said, "If you will get in, you will be mayor." The shepherd was willing and got in, and the peasant shut the top down on him. Then he took the shepherd's flock for him and drove it away. The parson went to the crowd and declared that the mass had been said. Then they came and rolled the barrel towards the water. When the barrel began to roll, the shepherd cried, "I am quite willing to be mayor." They believed no otherwise than that it was the peasant who was saying this, and answered, "That is what we intend. But first you shall look about you a little down below there." And they rolled the barrel down into the water. After that, the peasants went home. And as they were entering the village, the small peasant who came quietly in, driving a flock of sheep and looking quite contented. Then the peasants were astonished and said, "Peasant, from whence do you come? Have you come out of the water?" "Yes, truly," replied the peasant. "I sank deep, deep down until at last I got to the bottom. I pushed the bottom out of the barrel and crept out, and there were pretty meadows on which a number of lambs were feeding. And from thence I brought this flock away with me." Said the peasants, "Are there any more there?" "Oh, yes," said he, "more than I could want." Then the peasants made up their mind that they too would fetch some sheep for themselves, a flock apiece. But the mayor said, "I come first." So they went to the water together, and just then there were some of the small fleecy clouds in the blue sky which are called little lambs, and they were reflected in the water, whereupon the peasants cried, "We already see the sheep deep down below." The mayor pressed forward and said, "I will go down first and look about me, and if things promise well, I'll call you." So he jumped in. Splash went the water. It sounded as if he were calling them, and the whole crowd plunged in after him as one man. Then the entire village was dead, and the small peasant, as sole heir, became a rich man. Huh. So we have the peasantest of peasants, the poorest of peasants, and he is just really tricksy. He wants a cow, and so he asks a carpenter to make him a little calf. And he gets a cow because he blames this shepherd for the cow being stolen. And so they go to the mayor, and the mayor's like, "Yeah, you can have this cow." So he actually does get a cow, but they can't feed the cow. So he kills the cow and like is gonna take the skin into the town, and just wild things happen. He ends up like pretending to soothsay, to be like a soothsayer with this raven that he finds. And so he ends up getting 200, several hundred monies, and leaves. And they're like, "How did you do this?" And he's like, "Well, I just sold my cow skin." And so like the mayor is like, "Great, I'm gonna do it first." And everybody else also killed their cows to take the skin into the village. And the merchant only gave like two monies, and nobody else even got that much. And they're like, "Why?" The merchant's like, "What am I going to do with all this cow skin? Like, I don't need all of this." And so it's just so wild. And so they unanimously declare that this peasant should die. So they are going to put him in a barrel full of holes and throw it into the water, and he's going to sink. And that's not what happens. He convinces this guy to trade places with him. He's like, if you go in this barrel, you will be mayor. And the guy is like, I would love to be mayor. So he trades places with him. That guy, sorry buddy, goes into the water, and then they see it sinks all the way down. And then they see the peasant and they're like, wow, you got out and you have all of these sheep, because he took the sheep from the guy that he swindled into going into the barrel. And they're like, he's like, yeah, I got them all at the bottom of the water. And everyone's like, yeah, let's go. And the mayor's like, I'm gonna go first. So the mayor jumps in, and then everybody else jumps in, and then the whole town dies. And then he's the only one left. And so he inherits the town and is now the richest man. What? No. All right, our next story is Frederick and Catherine. There was once a man called Frederick. He had a wife whose name was Catherine, and they had not long been married. One day Frederick said, Kate, I am going to work in the fields. When I come back, I shall be hungry, so let me have something nice cooked, and a good draught of ale. Very well, said she. It shall be all ready. When dinner time drew nigh, Catherine took a nice steak, which was all the meat she had, and put it on the fire to fry. The steak soon began to look brown and crackle in the pan, and Catherine stood by with a fork and turned it. That she said to herself, the steak is almost ready. I may as well go to the cellar for the ale. So she left the pan on the fire and took a large jug and went into the cellar and tapped the ale cask. The beer ran into the jug, and Catherine stood looking on. At last it popped into her head. Oh, the dog is not shut up. He may be running away with the steak. It's well thought of. So up she ran from the cellar, and sure enough, the rascally dog had got the steak in his mouth and was making off with it. Away ran Catherine, and away ran the dog across the field. But he ran faster than she, and struck close to the stake. It's all gone, and what can't be cured must be endured, said Catherine. So she turned around, and as she had run a good way and was tired, she walked home leisurely to cool herself. Now all this time, and the ale was running too, for Catherine had not turned the spigot, and when the jug was full, the liquor ran upon the floor till the cask was empty. When she got to the cellar stairs, she saw what had happened. Oh, my stars, said she, what shall I do to keep Frederick from seeing all this slopping about? So she thought a while, and at last remembered that there was a sack of fine meal bought at the last fair, and that if she sprinkled this over the floor, it would suck up the ale nicely. What a lucky thing, said she, that we kept that meal. We have now a good use for it. So away she went for it, but she managed to set it down just upon the great jug full of beer, and upset it. And thus all the ale had been saved, was set swimming on the floor also. Oh, well, said she, when one goes another may as well follow. Then she strewed the meal all about the cellar, and was quite pleased with her cleverness, and said, how very neat and clean it looks. At noon, Frederick came home. Now, wife, cried he, what have you for dinner? Oh, Frederick, answered she, I was cooking you a steak, but while I went down to draw the ale, the dog ran away with it, and while I ran after him, the ale ran out, and when I went to dry up the ale with the sack of meal that we got at the fair, I upset the jug, but the cellar is now quite dry, and looks so clean. Kate, Kate, said he, how could you do all this? Why did you leave the steak to fry and the ale to run, and then spoil all the meal? Why, Frederick, said she, I did not know I was doing wrong. You should have told me before. The husband thought to himself, if my wife manages matters thus, I must look sharp myself. Now he had a good deal of gold in the house, so he had said to Catherine, what pretty yellow buttons those are. I shall put them into a box and bury them in the garden, but take care that you never go near or meddle with them." "No, Frederick," said she, "that I never will." As soon as he was gone, there came by some peddlers with earthenware plates and dishes, and they asked her whether she would buy. "Oh, dear me, I should like to buy very much, but I have no money. If you had any use for yellow buttons, I might deal with you." "Yellow buttons?" said they. "Let us have a look at them. Go into the garden and dig where I tell you, and you will find the yellow buttons. I dare not go by myself." So the rogues went, and when they found what those yellow buttons were, they took them all away and left her plenty of plates and dishes. Then she set them all about the house for a show, and when Frederick came back, he cried out, "Kate, what have you been doing?" "See," she said, "I have bought all these with your yellow buttons, but I did not touch them myself. The peddlers went themselves and dug them up." "Wife, wife," said Frederick, "what a pretty piece of work you have made! Those yellow buttons were all of my money. How came you to do such a thing?" "Why," answered she, "I did not know that there was any harm in it. You should have told me." Catherine stood musing for a while, and at last said to her husband, "Hark ye, Frederick, we will soon get the gold back. Let us run after the thieves." "Well, we will try," answered he. "But take some butter and cheese with you, that we may have something to eat by the way." "Very well," said she, and they set out, and as Frederick walked the fastest, he left his wife some way behind. "Does not matter," thought she. "When we turn back, I shall be so much nearer home than he." Presently she came to the top of a hill, down the side of which there was a road so narrow that the cartwheels always chafed the trees on each side as they passed. "Ah, see now," said she, "how they have bruised and wounded those poor trees. They will never get well." So she took pity on them, and made use of the butter to grease them all, so that the wheels might not hurt them so much. While she was doing this kind office, one of her cheeses fell out of the basket and rolled down the hill. Catherine looked, but could not see where it had gone, so she said, "Well, I suppose the other will go the same way and find you. He has younger legs than I have." Then she rolled the other cheese after it, and away it went, nobody knows where, down the hill. But she said she supposed that they knew the road, and would follow her, and she could not stay there all day waiting for them. At last she overtook Frederick, who desired her to give him something to eat. Then she gave him the dry bread. Where are the butter and cheese?" said he. "Oh," answered she, "I used the butter to grease those poor trees that the wheels chafed so, and one of the cheeses ran away, so I set the other one after it to find it, and I suppose they are both on the road together somewhere." "What a goose you are to do such silly things," said the husband. "How can you say so?" said she. "I am sure you never told me not." They ate the dry bread together, and Frederick said, "Kate, I hope you locked the door safe when you came away." "No," answered she, "you did not tell me." "Then go home and do it now before we go any farther," said Frederick, "and bring with you something to eat." Catherine did as he told her, and thought to herself by the way, "Frederick wants something to eat, but I don't think he's very fond of butter and cheese. I'll bring him a bag of fine nuts, and the vinegar, for I have often seen him take some." When she reached home, she bolted the back door, but the front door she took off the hinges and said, "Frederick told me to lock the door, but surely it can nowhere be so safe if I take it with me." So she took her time by the way, and when she overtook her husband, she cried out, "There, Frederick, there is the door itself. You may watch it as carefully as you please." "Alas, alas," said he, "what a clever wife I have. I sent you to make the house fast, and you take the door away so that everybody may go in and out as they please. However, As you have brought the door, you shall carry it about with you for your pains." "Very well," answered she. "I'll carry the door, but I'll not carry the nuts and vinegar bottle also. That would be too much of a load. So if you please, I'll fasten them to the door." Frederick, of course, made no objection to that plan, and they set off into the wood to look for the thieves. But they could not find them, and when it grew dark, they climbed up into a tree to spend the night there. Scarcely were they up, when who should come by but the very rogues they were looking for. They were, in truth, great rascals, and belonged to that class of people who find things before they are lost. They were tired. So they sat down and made a fire under the very tree where Frederick and Catherine were. Frederick slipped down on the other side and picked up some stones. Then he climbed up again and tried to hit the thieves on the head with them. But they only said, "It must be near morning, for the wind shakes the fir apples down." Catherine, who had the door on her shoulder, began to be very tired, but she thought it was the nuts upon it that were so heavy. So she said softly, "Frederick, I must let the nuts go." "No," answered he, "not now. They will discover us." "I can't help that. They must go." "Well then, make haste and throw them down if you will." Then away rattled the nuts, down among the boughs, and one of the thieves cried, "Bless me, it is hailing." A little while after, Catherine thought the door was still very heavy, so she whispered to Frederick, "I must throw the vinegar down." "Pray don't," answered he. "It will discover us." "I can't help that," said she. It must." So she poured all the vinegar down, and the thieves said, "What a heavy dude there is!" At last it popped into Catherine's head that it was the door itself that was so heavy all the time, so she whispered, "Frederick, I must throw the door down soon." But he begged and prayed her not to do so, for he was sure it would betray them. "Here goes it, however," said she, and down went the door with such a clatter upon the thieves that they cried out, "Murder!" and not knowing what was coming, ran away as fast as they could, and left all the gold. So when Frederick and Catherine came down, there they found all their money safe and sound. All right. Sweetheart Roland. There was once upon a time a woman who was a real witch and had 2 daughters. One ugly and wicked, and this one she loved because she was her own daughter, and one beautiful and good, and this one she hated because she was her stepdaughter. The stepdaughter once had a pretty apron, which was the other fancied so much that she became envious, and told her mother that she must and would have that apron. "Be quiet, my child," said the old woman, "and you shall have it. Your stepsister has long deserved your stepsister has long deserved death. Tonight, when she is asleep, I will come and cut her head off. Only be careful that you are at the far side of the bed, and push her well to the front. It would have been all over with the poor girl if she had not just then be standing in the corner and heard everything." All day long she dared not go out of doors, and when bedtime had come, the witch's daughter got into bed first, so as to lie at the far side. But when she was asleep, the other pushed her gently to the front, and took for herself the place at the back, close by the wall. In the night the old woman came creeping in. She held an axe in her right hand, and felt with her left to see if anyone were lying at the outside, and when she grasped the axe with both hands and cut her own child's head off. When she had gone away, the girl got up and went to her sweetheart, who was called Roland, and knocked at his door. When he came out, she said to him, "Listen, dearest Roland, we must fly in all haste. My stepmother wanted to kill me, but has struck her own child. When daylight comes and she sees what she has done, she will be lost." "But," said Roland, "I counsel you first to take away her magic wand, or we cannot escape if she pursues us." The maiden fetched the magic wand, and she took the dead girl's head and dropped 3 drops of blood on the ground, 1 in front of the bed, 1 in the kitchen, and 1 on the stairs. Then she hurried away with her lover. When the old witch got up next morning, she called her daughter, and wanted to give her the apron, but she did not come. Then the witch cried, "Where are you?" "Here on the stairs. I am sweeping," answered the first drop of blood. The old woman went out, but saw no one on the stairs, and cried again, "Where are you?" "Here in the kitchen. I am warming myself," cried the second drop of blood. She went into the kitchen, but found no one. Then she cried again, "Where are you?" "Ah, here in the bed. I am sleeping," cried the third drop of blood. She went into the room to the bed. What did she see there? Her own child, whose head she had cut off, bathed in her blood. The witch fell into a passion, sprang to the window, and as she could look forth quite far into the future, she perceived her stepdaughter hurrying away with her sweetheart Roland. "That shall not help you," cried she. "Even if you have got a long way off, you shall still not escape me." She put on her many-league boots, in which she covered an hour's walk at every step, and it was not long before she overtook them. The girl, however, when she saw the old woman striding towards her, changed with her magic wand her sweetheart Roland into the lake, and herself into a duck swimming in the middle of it. The witch placed herself on the shore, threw breadcrumbs in, and went to endless trouble to entice the duck. But the duck did not let herself be enticed, and the old woman had to go home at night as she had come. At this, the girl and her sweetheart Roland resumed their natural shapes again, and they walked on the whole night until daybreak. Then the maiden changed herself into a beautiful flower which stood in the midst of a briar hedge, and her sweetheart Roland into a fiddler. It was not long before the witch came striding up towards them and said to the musician, "Dear musician, may I pluck that beautiful flower for myself?" "Oh, yes," he replied. "I will play to you while you do it." As she was hastily creeping into the hedge and was just going to pluck the flower, knowing perfectly well who the flower was, he began to play. And whether she would or not, she was forced to dance, for it was a magical dance. The faster he played, the more violent springs was she forced to make, and the thorns tore her clothes from her body, and pricked her, and wounded her till she bled. And as he did not stop, she had to dance till she lay dead on the ground. As they were now set free, Roland said, "Now, I must go to my father and arrange for the wedding." "Then in the meantime I will stay here and wait for you," said the girl, "and that no one may recognize me, I will change myself into a red stone landmark." Then Roland went away, and the girl stood like a red landmark in the field and waited for her beloved. But when Roland got home, he fell into the snares of another, who so fascinated him that he forgot the maiden. The poor girl remained there a long time, but at length, as he did not return at all, she was sad, and changed herself into a flower and thought, "Someone will surely come this way and trample me down." It befell, however, that a shepherd kept his sheep in the field and saw the flower, and as it was so pretty, plucked it, took it with him, and laid it away in his chest. From that time forth, strange things happened in the shepherd's house. When he arose in the morning, all the work was already done. The room was swept, the table and benches cleaned, the fire in the hearth was lighted, and the water was fetched. And at noon, when he came home, the table was laid and a good dinner served. He could not conceive how this came to pass, for he never saw a human being in his house, and no one could have concealed himself in it. He was certainly pleased with this good attendance, but still at last he was so afraid that he went to a wise woman and asked for her advice. The wise woman said, "There is some enchantment behind it. Listen very early some morning if anything is moving in the room, and if you see anything, no matter what it is, throw a white cloth over it, and then the magic will be stopped." The shepherd did as she bade him, and next morning, just as day dawned, he saw the chest open and the flowers come out. Swiftly he sprang towards it and threw a white cloth over it. Instantly the transformation came to an end, and a beautiful girl stood before him, who admitted to him that she had been the flower, and that up to this time she had attended to his housekeeping. She told him her story, and as she pleased him, he asked her if she would marry him, but she answered no, for she wanted to remain faithful to her sweetheart Roland, although he had deserted her. Nevertheless, she promised not to go away, but to continue keeping house for the shepherd. And now the time drew nearer when Roland's wedding was to be celebrated. And then, according to an old custom in the country, it was announced that all the girls were to be present at it and sing in honor of the bridal pair. When the faithful maiden heard of this, she grew so sad that she thought her heart would break, and she would not go thither. But the other girls came and took her. When it came to her turn to sing, she stepped back until at last she was the only one left, and then she could not refuse. But when she began her song, and it reached Roland's ears, he sprang up and cried, "I know that voice. That is the true bride. I will have no other." Everything he had forgotten, and which had vanished from his mind, had suddenly come home again in his heart. Then the faithful maiden held her wedding with her sweetheart Roland, and grief came to an end, and joy began. That one was all over the place. just just all over the place. So we started with this stepmother who has a daughter and her stepdaughter. And she's like, "All right, I'm gonna kill the stepdaughter because it's about time she deserves death. So what I'm gonna do, make sure that you're sleeping on this one specific side." The stepdaughter hears this in the other room, and so she does a little like switcheroosies, and then the like stepmother comes in with an axe, and then just shink chops off her own daughter's head. Whoopsie daisy. Um, and the stepdaughter is like, I need to leave. So she goes to Roland, her one true love, and is like, "We gotta go." And so Roland is like, "All right, away we go." And they get whisked away, and they magically transform into various things because the old woman is after them and looking for them. And the old woman is like, "I know that this flower is obviously the stepdaughter that I need to kill." So she's like, I'm gonna pluck it. And the fiddler, who is Roland, is like, "Let me play you a song while you do this." And of course, it's a magic song, and it makes her dance. And the faster he plays, the more aggressive she dances, and then she dies. Okay. And then he's gonna go off and do something. And she's like, "I'm gonna stay here and wait for you." And so he leaves, and it is a very, very long time. And she's like, "Oh, he's not gonna come back," because he found somebody else. He found like another maiden and is like, "This is the maiden that I'm gonna marry." And so she's really sad, and she finds this house. Is he a shepherd? I don't know. Everybody's like a shepherd or a miller, it seems like. And so she starts like taking care of the house, and the like miller is like, or shepherd, this guy is like, "Witchcraft." And so he goes to a wise woman, and the wise woman is like, "Just throw a sheet over like whatever you hear moving." And so he does that, and it's the stepdaughter, and she's like, "I'm gonna tell you my story." And so she does. And then they do it, like it comes to be the day of the wedding that of Roland and this other maiden that he found and forgot about his one true love. And then everybody's singing, and they're like, "You need to sing." And she's like, "I don't want to sing." And they're like, "You need to sing." And she's like, "Okay, la la la." And she starts singing. And then it reaches Roland's ears, and he's like, "I know this voice, my love." And then they get married. And then happily ever after. Classic tale. Tale as old as time. Miller, Shepherd, and Baker. Yes. Those That's who you are. If you're not any of them, then you're a maiden. They can't all be S tier. Let's see. Snowdrop. It was the middle of winter, when the broad flakes of snow were falling around, that the queen of a country many thousand miles off sat working at her window. The frame of the window was made of fine black ebony, and as she sat looking out upon the snow, she pricked her finger, and 3 drops of blood fell upon it. Then she gazed thoughtfully upon the red drops that sprinkled the white snow, and said, "Would that my little daughter may be as white as that snow, as red as that blood, and as black as this ebony window frame." And so the little girl really did grow up. Her skin was as white as snow, her cheeks as rosy as the blood, and her hair as black as ebony, and she was called Snowdrop. But this queen died, and the king soon married another wife, who became queen and was very beautiful, but so vain that she could not bear to think that anyone could be handsomer than she was. She had a fairy looking-glass, to which she used to go, and then she would gaze upon herself in it and say, "Tell me, glass, tell me true, of all the ladies in the land, who is fairest? Tell me, who?" And the glass had always answered, "Thou, queen, art the fairest in all the land." But Snowdrop grew more and more beautiful, and when she was 7 years old she was as bright as the day, and fairer than the queen herself. Then the glass one day answered the queen, when she went to look in it as usual, "Thou, queen, art fair and beauteous to see, but Snowdrop is lovelier far than thee." When she heard this, she turned pale with rage and envy, and called to one of her servants and said, "Take Snowdrop away into the wild wood, that I may never see her any more." Then the servant led her away, but his heart melted when Snowdrop begged him to spare her life, and he said, "I will not hurt you, thou pretty child." So he left her by herself, and though he thought it most likely that the wild beasts would tear her in pieces, he felt as if a great weight were taken off his heart when he had made up his mind not to kill her, but to leave her to her fate, with the chance of someone finding and saving her. Then poor Snowdrop wandered along through the wood in great fear, and the wild beasts roared about her, but none did her any harm. In the evening she came to a cottage among the hills and went in to rest, for her little feet would carry her no further. Everything was spruce and neat in the cottage. On the table was spread a white cloth, and there were 7 little plates, 7 little loaves, and 7 little glasses with wine in them, and 7 knives and forks laid in order, and by the wall stood 7 little beds. As she was very hungry, she picked a little piece of each loaf, and drank a very little wine out of each glass, and after that she thought she would lie down and rest. So she tried all the little beds, but one was too long, and another was too short, till at last the 7th suited her, and there she laid herself down and went to sleep. By and by in came the masters of the cottage. Now they were 7 little dwarfs that lived among the mountains, and dug and searched for gold. They lighted up their 7 lamps, and saw at once that all was not right. The first said, "Who's been sitting on my stool?" The second, "Who's been eating off my plate?" The third, "Who has been picking my bread?" The fourth, "Who has been meddling with my spoon?" The fifth, "Who's been handling my fork?" The sixth, "Who has been cutting with my knife?" The seventh, "Who has been drinking my wine?" Then the first looked round and said, Who has been laying on my bed?" And the rest came running to him, and everyone cried out that somebody had been upon his bed. But the seventh saw Snowdrop, and called all his brethren to come and see her. And they cried out with wonder and astonishment, and brought their lamps to look at her, and said, "Good heavens, what a lovely child she is!" And they were very glad to see her, and took care not to wake her. And the seventh dwarf slept an hour with each of the other dwarfs in turn, till the night was gone. In the morning, Snowdrop told them all her story, and they pitied her, and said if she would keep all things in order, and cook and wash and knit and spin for them, she might stay where she was, and they would take good care of her. Then they went out all day long to their work, seeking for gold and silver in the mountains. But Snowdrop was left at home, and they warned her and said, "The queen will soon find out where you are, so take care and let no one in." But the queen, now that she thought Snowdrop was dead, believed that she must be the handsomest lady in the land, and she went to the glass and said, "Tell me, glass, tell me true, of all the ladies in the land, who is fairest? Tell me who." And the glass answered, "Thou, queen, art the fairest in all the land. But over the hills in the greenwood shade, where the seven dwarfs their dwelling have made, there Snowdrop is hiding her head, and she is lovelier far, O queen, than thee." Then the queen was very much frightened, for she knew that the glass always spoke the truth, and was sure that the servant had betrayed her. And she could not bear to think that anyone lived who was more beautiful than she was. So she dressed herself up as an old peddler, and went her way over the hills to the place where the dwarfs dwelt. Then she knocked at the door and cried, "Fine wares to sell." Snowdrop looked out at the window and said, "Good day, good woman. What have you to sell?" "Good wares, fine wares," said she, "laces and bobbins of all colors." "I will let the old lady in. She seems to be a very good sort of body." Though Snowdrop, as she ran down and unbolted the door, "Bless me," said the old woman, "how badly your stays are laced. Let me lace them up with one of my nice new laces." Snowdrop did not dream of any mischief, so she stood before the old woman. But she set to work so nimbly, and pulled the lace so tight, that Snowdrop's breath was stopped, and she fell down as if she were dead. "There's an end to all thy beauty," said the spiteful queen, and went away home. In the evening the seven dwarfs came home, and I need not say how grieved they were to see their faithful Snowdrop stretched out upon the ground as if she was quite dead. However, they lifted her up, and when they found what ailed her, they cut the lace, and in a little time she began to breathe, and very soon came to life again. Then they said, "The old woman was the queen herself. Take care another time, and let no one in when we are away." When the queen got home, she went straight to the glass and spoke to it as before, but to her great grief it still says, "Thou, queen, art the fairest in all this land. But over the hills in the greenwood shade, where the seven dwarfs their dwelling have made, there Snowdrop is hiding her head, and she is lovelier far, O queen, than thee." And the blood ran cold in her heart with spite and malice, to see that Snowdrop still lived, and she dressed herself up again, but in quite another dress from the one she wore before, and took with her a poisoned comb. When she reached the dwarf's cottage, she knocked at the door and cried, "Fine wares to sell." But Snowdrop said, "Oh, I dare not let anyone in." Then the queen said, "Only look at my beautiful combs," and gave her the poisoned one, and it looked so pretty that she took it up and put it into her hair to try it, but the moment it touched her head, the poison was so powerful that she fell down senseless. "There you may lie," said the queen, and went her way. But by good luck the dwarfs came in very early that evening, and when they saw Snowdrop lying on the ground they thought what had happened, and soon found the poisoned comb. And when they took it away, she got well, and told them all that had passed, and they warned her once more not to open the door to anyone. Meantime, the queen went home to her glass and shook with rage when she read the very same answer as before, and she said, "Snowdrop shall die if it cost me my life." So she went by herself into her chamber and got ready a poisoned apple. The outside looked very rosy and tempting, but whoever tasted it was sure to die. Then she dressed herself up as a peasant's wife, and traveled over the hills to the dwarf's cottage, and knocked at the door. But Snowdrop put her head out of the window and said, "I dare not let anyone in, for the dwarfs have told me not." "Do as you please," said the old woman, "but at any rate take this pretty apple. I will give it to you." "No," said Snowdrop, "I dare not take it." "You silly girl," answered the other. "What are you afraid of? Do you think it is poisoned? Come, do you eat one part, and I will eat the other." Now the apple was so made up that one side was good, though the other side was poisoned. Then Snowdrop was much tempted to taste, for the apple looked so very nice, and when she saw the old woman eat, she could wait no longer. But she had scarcely put the piece into her mouth when she fell down dead upon the ground. "This time nothing will save thee," said the queen, and she went home to her glass, and at last it said, "Thou, queen, art the fairest of all the fair." And then her wicked heart was glad, and as happy as such a heart could be. When evening came, and the dwarfs had gone home, they found Snowdrop lying on the ground. No breath came from her lips, and they were afraid that she was quite dead. They lifted her up, and combed her hair, and washed her face with wine and water, but all was in vain, for the little girl seemed quite dead. So they laid her down upon a bier, and all 7 watched and bewailed her 3 whole days. And then they thought they would bury her. But her cheeks were still rosy, and her face looked just as it did while she was alive. So they said, "We will never bury her in the cold ground." And they made a coffin of glass, so that they might look at her, and wrote upon it in golden letters what her name was, and that she was a king's daughter. And the coffin was set among the hills, and one of the dwarfs always sat by it and watched, and the birds of the air came too, and bemoaned Snowdrop. And first of all came an owl, and then a raven, and at last a dove, and sat by her side. And thus Snowdrop lay for a long time, and still only looked as though she was asleep, for she was even now as white as snow, and as red as blood, and as black as ebony. At last a prince came and called at the dwarf's house, and he saw Snowdrop, and read what was written in golden letters. Then he offered the dwarfs money, and prayed and besought them to let him take her away, but they said, "We will not part with her for all the gold in the world." At last, however, they had pity on him, and gave him the coffin, but the moment he lifted it up to carry it home with him, the piece of apple fell from between her lips, and Snowdrop awoke, and said, "Where am I?" And the prince said, "Thou art quite safe with me." Then he told her all that had happened, and said, "I love you far better than all the world, so come with me to my father's palace, and you shall be my wife." And Snowdrop consented, and went home with the prince, and everything was got ready with great pomp and splendor for their wedding. To the feast was asked, among the rest, Snowdrop's old enemy, the queen. And as she was dressing herself in fine, rich clothes, she looked in the glass and said, "Tell me, glass, tell me true, of all the ladies in the land, who is fairest? Tell me who." And the glass answered, "Thou, lady, art loveliest here, I ween, but lovelier far is the new made queen. When she heard this, she started with rage, but her envy and curiosity were so great that she could not help setting out to see the bride. And when she got there, and saw that it was no other than Snowdrop, who, as she thought, had been dead a long while, she choked with rage and fell down and died. But Snowdrop and the prince lived and reigned happily over that land many, many years, and sometimes they went up into the mountains and paid a visit to the little dwarfs, who had been so kind to Snowdrop in her time of need. End of that one. No magic kiss? So she didn't even like chew the apple, she just chomped it and then died? Or was like passed out in a coma? Wild. Wild, wild, wild. So yeah, little different. Little different. It is always interesting to see like how stories have changed because there is like the part of the story that's not in here that like I've heard so many times, but like when the huntsman like is supposed to go out and kill Snow White and like bring back the heart, he brings back like a pig's heart or something as proof. Interesting, interesting. And also, um, I didn't realize that the queen like went there so many times. That's pretty great. I liked it. I liked that one. Also, why? Okay, so true, she wasn't like actually dead, but why would they think that a glass coffin above ground would be a splendid idea? Have have they just not heard of decay? That would be a horror site all on its own. Is just like a decayed snowdrop. Gross. A gross. It's fine. The pink. There was once upon a time a queen to whom God had given no children. Every morning she went into the garden and prayed to God in heaven to bestow on her a son or a daughter. Then an angel from heaven came to her and said, "Be at rest. You shall have a son with your power of wishing, so that whatsoever in the world he wishes for, that shall he have." Then she went to the king and told him the joyful tidings. And when the time was come, she gave birth to a son, and the king was filled with gladness. Every morning she went with the child to the garden where the wild beasts were kept, and washed herself there in a clear stream. It happened once, when the child was a little older, that he was lying in her arms, and she fell asleep. Then came the old cook, who knew that the child had the power of wishing, and stole it away, and he took a hen and cut it in pieces, and dropped some of its blood on the queen's apron and on her dress. Then he carried the child away to a secret place where a nurse was obliged to suckle it, and he ran to the king and accused the queen of having allowed her child to be taken from her by the wild beasts. When the king saw the blood on her apron, he believed this, fell into such a passion that he ordered a high tower to be built, in which neither sun nor moon could be seen, and had his wife put into it and walled up. Here she was to stay for 7 years without meat or drink, and die of hunger. But God sent 2 angels from heaven in the shape of white doves, which flew to her twice a day, and carried her food until the 7 years were over. The cook, however, thought to himself, "If the child has the power of wishing, and I am here, he might very easily get me into trouble." So he left the palace and went to the boy, who was already big enough to speak, and said to him, "Wish for a beautiful palace for yourself with a garden, and all else that pertains to it." Scarcely were the words out of the boy's mouth when everything was there that he had wished for. After a while, the cook said to him, "It is not well for you to be so alone. Wish for a pretty girl as a companion." Then the king's son wished for him, and she immediately stood before him, and was more beautiful than any painter could have painted her. The two played together, and loved each other with all their hearts, and the old cook went out hunting like a nobleman. The thought occurred to him, however, that the king's son might some day wish to be with his father, and thus bring him into great peril. So he went out and took the maiden aside and said, "Tonight, when the boy is asleep, go to his bed and plunge this knife into his heart, and bring me his heart and tongue, and if you do not do it, you shall lose your life." Thereupon he went away, and when he returned next day she had not done it, and said, "Why should I shed the blood of an innocent boy who has never harmed anyone?" The cook once more said, "If you do not do it, it shall cost you your own life." When he had gone away, she had a little hind brought to her, and ordered her to be killed, and took her heart and tongue, and laid them on a plate, and when she saw the old man coming, she said to the boy, "Lie down in your bed, and draw the clothes over you." Then the wicked wretch came in, and said, "Where are the boy's heart and tongue?" The girl reached the plate to him, but the king's son threw off the quilt and said, "You old sinner, why did you want to kill me? Now will I pronounce thy sentence. You shall become a black poodle and have a gold collar round your neck, and shall eat burning coals till the flames burst forth from your throat." And when he had spoken these words, the old man was changed into a poodle dog, and had a gold collar round his neck, and the cooks were ordered to bring up live coals, and these he ate until the flames broke forth from his throat. While the king's son remained there a short while longer, and he thought of his mother and wondered if she was still alive. At length he said to the maiden, "I will go home to my own country, if you will go with me. I will provide for you." "Oh," she replied, "the way is so long, and what shall I do in a strange land where I am unknown?" As she did not seem quite willing, and as they could not be parted from each other, he wished that she might be changed into a beautiful pink, and took her with him. Then he went away with his own country, and the poodle had to run after him. He went to the tower in which his mother was confined, and as it was so high, he wished for a ladder which could reach up to the very top. Then he mounted up and looked inside, and cried, "Beloved mother, Lady Queen, are you still alive, or are you dead?" She answered, "I have just eaten, and am still satisfied." For she thought the angels were there. Said he, "I am your dear son, whom the wild beasts were said to have torn from your arms, but I am alive still, and will soon set you free." Then he descended again, and went to his father, and caused himself to be announced as a strange huntsman, and said if he could offer him service. The king said yes, if he was skillful and could get game for him, he should come to him, but that deer had never taken up their quarters in any part of the district or country. Then the huntsman promised to procure as much game for him as he could possibly use at the royal table. So he summoned all the huntsmen together, and bade them go out into the forest with them. And he went with them, and made them form a great circle, open at one end where he stationed himself, and began to wish. 200 deer and more came running inside the circle at once, and the huntsmen shot them. Then they were all placed on 60 country carts, and driven home to the king, and for once he was able to deck his table with game, after having had none at all for years. Now the king felt great joy at this, and commanded that his entire household should eat with him next day, and made a great feast. When they were all assembled together, he said to the huntsman, "As you are so clever, you shall sit by me." He replied, "Lord King, your majesty must excuse me. I am a poor huntsman." But the king insisted on it, and said, "You shall sit by me," until he did it. Whilst he was sitting there, he thought of his dearest mother, and wished that one of the king's principal servants would begin to speak of her, and would ask how it was faring with the queen in the tower, and if she were alive still, or had perished. Hardly had he formed the wish that the marshal began, and said, "Your majesty, we live joyously here, but how is the queen living in the tower? Is she still alive, or has she died?" But the king replied, "She let my dear son be torn to pieces by wild beasts. I will not have her named." Then the huntsman arose and said, "Gracious Lord Father, she is still alive, and I am her son, and I was not carried away by wild beasts, but by that wretch, the old cook, who tore me from her arms when she was asleep, and sprinkled her apron with the blood of a chicken." Thereupon he took the dog with the golden collar, and said, "That is the wretch," and caused live coals to be brought, and these the dog was compelled to devour before the sight of all, until flames burst forth from its throat. On this the huntsman asked the king if he would like to see the dog in his true shape, and wished him back into the form of the cook, in which he stood immediately, with his white apron and his knife by his side. When the king saw him, he fell into a passion, and ordered him to be cast into the deepest dungeon. Then the huntsman spoke further, and said, "Father, will you see the maiden who brought me up so tenderly, and who was afterwards to murder me, but did not do so, though her own life depended on it?" The king replied, "Yes, I would like to see her." The son said, "Most gracious father, I will show her to you in the form of a beautiful flower." And he thrust his hand into his pocket, and brought forth the pink, and placed it in the royal table, and it was so beautiful that the king had never seen one to equal it. Then the son said, "Now will I show her to you in her own form," and wished that she might become a maiden. And she stood there looking so beautiful that no painter could have made her look more so. And the king sent 2 waiting maids and 2 attendants into the tower to fetch the queen and bring her to the royal table. But when she was led in, she ate nothing, and said, "The gracious and merciful God who has supported me in the tower will soon set me free." She lived 3 days more, and then died happily. And when she was buried, the 2 white doves, which had brought her food to the tower, and were angels of heaven, followed her body and seated themselves on her grave. The aged king ordered the cook to be torn in 4 pieces, but grief consumed the king's own heart, and he soon died. His son married the beautiful maiden whom he had brought with him as a flower in his pocket, and whether they are still alive or not is known to God. Oh, end of the story. Okay, another weird one, and one that I'm like, is this a happy ending? I don't really know. Like some of them are clearly like, and they live happily ever after, and some of them are just like nobody's happy. But like this one, I don't know. So we have this mother who like so wishes to have a child, and an angel comes and visits her and is like, "You're gonna have a child, and this child is gonna be able to wish for whatever they want and be able to get it." And so the queen has a boy. Everyone's very excited. She's down by the river. She falls asleep. The cook is like, "I know what this child can do." So steals it and makes it look like the child had been slaughtered by wild animals. And then like takes the like son away and has him like grow up and like wish for things. And then the king finds out and is like blames everything on the queen, that she could just fall asleep and let this happen to his beloved son. So he locks her into a tower with no doors and no way out, and is going to leave her there for 7 years with no food and no water. And if she dies, she dies. If she lives, she lives. And these little doves come, these little angels, and brings her food each day. And the boy finds out like all of these things. Well, the cook wants to kill the boy because he is just scared. He's scared that the king is going to find out everything and kill him anyway. So the cook wants to kill the boy. The maiden is like, "No, I'm not going to do it." And then the boy wishes him to be a poodle who eats live coals until his throat bursts with fire. Extremely specific. And then the boy goes to see his mother to set her free, and he pretends to be a huntsman for the king. The king is like, "Yep." And he goes and like wishes for a bunch of deer for the table. And then the king is like, "No, the wife, the queen, like betrayed me. We're never going to speak about her again." And then the boy stands up and is like, "It is I, Papa. I'm alive, and so is your wife." And whatever. And then the queen just dies anyway. She like is released from the tower and she's like, I don't need your help. The angel shall provide for me. And then she dies 3 days later, and then the king is so upset that he dies. And then we don't know we don't know if the boy survives, if he's still alive. What? Um yeah. And that's where we're gonna end tonight. And that's where we're gonna end. We will continue next time. Our first one next time is called Clever Elsie. So, very exciting. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Wouldn't be here if it wasn't for all of y'all. As always, whether you lurk, whether you chat, I 1000% appreciate you. And I 1000 appreciate your support. If I don't see you next time, I hope to see you very soon. Goodbye.